Why read in English? Why should I bother reading in English is a question I often hear from my students. They usually think, I attend my classes, do my homework, and watch English movies, so why do I need to read books? The truth is, reading is one of the most effective ways to improve your English, and here's why. First of all, reading is essential. In the past, maybe only 1 in 4 people went to college, but today, that number is much higher. Many jobs now demand better reading and writing skills than they did just a few decades ago, whether you're in an office setting or working with your hands. Secondly, reading improves your speaking, writing, vocabulary, and grammar in ways that no other method can. It might not directly make your listening comprehension better, but it will enrich your vocabulary, which in turn makes it easier to understand what you hear. And improving your vocabulary will always benefit your listening skills in the long run. Now, I get it. You probably remember reading boring textbooks or stories in school with questions at the end, but that's not what I mean by reading. I'm talking about reading for enjoyment. This is when you pick up a book that interests you just because you want to, not because your teacher told you to, or because you feel like you have to. You're reading simply because you enjoy it. There was an experiment done in some U.S. schools where boys were given free books, fun ones like action-packed novels. They were told they didn't have to read them if they didn't want to, but guess what? They read them anyway. In fact, some of them devoured a book every couple of days. After a few years, the students who had been given the books were tested, and they showed significant improvement in both reading and writing skills. They also started enjoying school more. The boys who weren't given the books didn't show much improvement at all. Some even fell behind. This isn't just true for native English speakers. A similar study was done in Fiji with students learning English. They tested 3 different methods: traditional English lessons with grammar and exercises, silent reading where students read on their own, and shared reading where the teacher read aloud to the students. After a year, the 2 reading groups performed better than the grammar-focused group. In fact, when the experiment was repeated in Singapore, the silent readers even outperformed students who had been studying grammar in terms of test results. In traditional classrooms, we often focus on memorizing vocabulary and grammar, but when you read, you pick these things up naturally. You might be thinking, reading in English is too hard for me. I always have to use a dictionary and it gets frustrating. I understand. That's exactly why I wrote this book. My goal is to make you fall in love with reading, with easy, enjoyable stories. The first few stories in the book are short and simple, but they get longer and a bit more challenging as you go. By the time you finish this book, you'll feel proud of yourself for having made real progress. I also host a podcast called English Listening Practice. 9 of the stories in this book were originally written for the podcast, and 1 was created just for this book. I've refined all the stories to make them both accessible and fun for learners at various levels: beginner, pre-intermediate, intermediate, and advanced. All the stories are fairy tales, some of them well-known and others less familiar, and one of them is an original story I created. You might be wondering, aren't fairy tales for kids? I need useful vocabulary for things like business or science. Well, actually, even fairy tales can be incredibly helpful. A study showed that 8% of the vocabulary in novels comes from academic word lists, the same kind of vocabulary you'll need for higher education. Another study looked at whether reading 1 million words of science fiction would help students learn essential academic vocabulary. The answer was a definite yes. So yes, even fairy tales can be beneficial for your learning. But I get it if you're still not convinced. When I first learned about these studies, I was skeptical too. But I love trying new things, and in 2017, I decided to put this theory to the test myself. I had always wanted to learn Spanish but wasn't making much progress with traditional methods. So I challenged myself to read 1 million words in Spanish, about 40 books, and see how much I could improve. I started with simple readings, similar to the one you're reading now. Then I moved on to translations of books I had already read in English, like Harry Potter, and Game of Thrones. As I gained confidence, I began reading original works by Latin American authors like Isabel Allende and Jorge Luis Borges, and I loved them. I also listened to podcasts, but always followed along with the transcripts to add new words to my learning. By the time I reached my goal of 1 million words, I could write and have conversations with native speakers at an intermediate level. I could understand almost everything I read and follow conversations when people spoke clearly. I learned more in 1 year through reading than many students learn in 2 years of traditional classes. The best part? I didn't memorize vocabulary lists or grammar rules. I learned everything naturally through the stories I read. You might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true, or maybe, I'm going to start reading for hours every day. But there's one key thing to remember. You need to read books that are fun and easy. If a book is too hard or boring, set it aside and find something else. Language expert Stephen Krashen recommends reading only things that you enjoy. He even suggests starting with material that's so easy you wouldn't read it in your native language because it would be too simple. You could read comics, magazines, thrillers, romance novels, anything that interests you. Don't feel bad about reading translations either. If you choose something easy enough, you'll understand the meaning of most new words without needing a dictionary. How easy is easy? Research shows that you should understand at least 98% of the words in a text for it to be effective. 98% might sound like a lot, but let me show you an example. Here's a text where 50% of the words are made up, so you'll understand half of it. Jean got out of bed and opened the curtains. He hummed while making breakfast. He brewed coffee and spread butter on his gringri. Someone called on his phone, and he picked it up, very surprised by who was on the line. His thingamajig dropped to the floor. How much of that made sense? Could you read a whole book like this? Now, here's the same passage, but with only 2% of the words being nonsense, so you'll understand 98% of it. Jean jumped out of bed and opened the curtains. He hummed while making breakfast. He brewed coffee and spread butter on his toast. Someone called on his phone, and he picked it up. He was so surprised by who was calling that his thingamajig fell to the floor. See the difference? You might not know every word, but it's much more enjoyable to read, right? That's why reading for fun works so well. You may not get everything, but you'll understand enough to follow the story without constantly needing a dictionary. So if this book feels too difficult, find something easier. If it's boring, find something more fun. I know not everyone will enjoy my writing, and that's perfectly okay. The key is to find books that suit your taste and level. When we're enjoying ourselves, we learn so much more. That's why I've left out exercises in this book. My goal was to create stories that are interesting and engaging, so you don't feel like you're studying at all. If you want to improve your English, just focus on reading for fun, and eventually you'll find yourself able to read essays, articles, and academic papers with ease. Reading in English is one of the most effective ways to improve your language skills, helping you build a stronger vocabulary, better grammar, and more confidence in speaking and writing. By choosing stories that interest you and reading for enjoyment, you'll naturally absorb the language without feeling like you're studying. Remember, the key to success is consistency and finding material that keeps you engaged. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with others looking to enhance their English skills. And be sure to subscribe to Jean and Fabie for more fun stories and practical tips to help you on your language learning journey. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join us, and let's improve our English together. See you in the next video.